Welcome everybody to the Culture and Community Circle workshop on Middle Eastern ethnic identities, statistically invisible in America, presented by Daniel Kakish. The discussion is focused on Middle Eastern ethnic identities, what these identities are, who decides them, the kinship of ethno-linguistic groups. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rana. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. I like to have more of a discussion format for these types of things because I noticed that people tend to um, take away more information when they're involved in asking questions rather than if someone is just lecturing the whole time. So please, if you have questions, feel free to ask during the presentation. If you want to wait till the end, that's fine too. So as you see from the title and from what Rana said, Middle Eastern ethnic identities, statistically invisible in America. So kind of the point of the presentation here is how you identify as a Middle Eastern person, if you are one. If not, what you should know about Middle Eastern identities. Is there one identity? Are there multiple? And what are these identities based on? And this is all important for the point of the census, right? In the United States, regarding the bubble and what we put what we mark. Do we mark white? And what is the advantage or disadvantage of having a bubble or not? So this is all related to that subject. The presentation will focus mainly on what we are and what we are not. And then you as an individual have obviously the free will, the ability to identify yourself accordingly. So this is just going to present information and you can apply it how you see fit. What was that? Okay.
Daniel,
Okay,
I believe someone's mic was unmuted, so I muted it. Please continue.
No problem. No problem. So as you see from the picture on the title slide, I have these are Bedouin Arabs in Sinai who are Muslim. And in the middle of them is a Greek Orthodox clergyman from the monastery in Sinai. And I wanted to use this picture to show an ethnic diversity, not just religious diversity, but ethnic diversity in the Middle East. So we're going to start off by defining some terms. And unfortunately, a lot of these terms are used interchangeably, but they mean very different things. Or sometimes a term is used in a certain way and it doesn't mean that. So we're going to kind of define a lot of the things we say in English. And again, this is open. So when I ask the question, it's not necessarily rhetorical. If you guys want to answer, please answer because I want to hear. And then even if you're not right, that's okay. No one knows everything. We're all learning. We're going to ask each question. And again, whoever wants to answer or try to answer, please go for it. So the first one is, what is an ethnicity? What does that mean? And let's ask the other questions first and we'll come back to it because that's kind of the main point of this whole thing. What is the difference between a nation and a state? Does anyone know? What is a nation and what is a state? No one wants to try? Okay. So a state is that which the people recognize to be the legitimate exerciser of violence. That is what a state is. So, for example, us as Americans, with people who live in America, we recognize that only the state is allowed to use violence, whether it's police or military or whoever, right? Um, so that is the state. A nation, there can be multiple nations in a state, or there can be multiple states that identify as the same nation. But a nation does not equal a state. So, like, for example, there are multiple Native American nations. There is the um, uh, Assyrian Chaldean Syriac nation. There is the Kurdish nation. All of these nations, like in Arabic, we say wataniya, right? Or qawmiya, which is ethnicity or nation. But that is not the same thing as a state. So in Iraq, for example, there are multiple nations in one state, Iraq being the state. Nationality is what you have on your passport. So, like, on my passport, I was born here in America. So on my passport, my nationality is American. Nationality is whatever country or state you belong to, you have citizenship of. So the topic of this presentation is going to be ethnicity, how we identify. And again, so this is not like an imposition. I'm not imposing an ethnicity on anyone. At the end of the day, and I'm going to talk about this more later. At the end of the day, you choose, your ethnic identification is up to you. Now, let's talk about what the Middle East is, because I mentioned earlier that we're talking about MENA, or we're talking about the bubble that we choose, right? And right now, the the thought of those people who want to propose a minority identification for Middle Eastern people or North African people or both is MENA. It's called Middle East North Africa, as a separate bubble from white. So we're gonna talk about. Okay. Again, if anyone has a question, please ask. Uh, so, what is the Middle East? What is the Middle East? Where does it start? Where does it stop? Who decides these things? Tell me. So, for example, is Turkey in the Middle East? Is Iran in the Middle East? Egypt? Who decides these things? Is Afghanistan in the Middle East? It's a very general term, and it's a arbitrary term that is not really defined what the Middle East is and what it's not. So, uh, when we're saying Middle East and North Africa, do we really know what that means? What's included in Middle East and North Africa? And as a Middle Eastern person or Middle East North African person, do you identify with that whole region? Do I identify with from Afghanistan and Turkey and Azerbaijan all the way to Morocco? Is that all the same? Like, in to have one identification for everybody. So this is what I'm getting at, and we're gonna get more into it in a little bit. What is an Arab? That's another question that people think sometimes is synonymous, but it's not synonymous with Middle Eastern, and it's not even synonymous with the countries who speak Arabic. Not everyone who lives in an Arabic-speaking country is an Arab. Not everyone who speaks exclusively Arabic is an Arab. So we have someone raising their hand. Please go ahead and ask. Or
Um, yeah, Arab. It's people who from Yemen and southern Saudi. That's who is Arab. Like Iraq, I read one time before, Iraqis are not considered Arabs because they are from different ethnicity. And an Arab, when they moved from Yemen and Saudi, they went up north, so they took that land, and so now that we Iraqis are Arab, but in like I think in the originally Iraq is not Arab country. I don't know, is that right or wrong? And you can answer that.
Thank you for the comment. Yeah, we'll get into that right now. So as you guys can see on the map here, um, Arabs are from Arabia just by the name, right? That is what an Arab is. Arabs are from Arabia. Hold on, sorry, I'm just reading a comment. And please إذا يريد يسأل أسئلة بالعربي ما يخالف أتكلم عربي فأنتوا حرين عربي أو إنجليزي بكيفكم. So Arabs are from Arabia, like you said, and and Arabia is what? The peninsula, as you see here. This kind of little island, right? So Saudi Arabia, what is today? What is today? Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, Emirat, Qatar, Bahrain. This is Arabia. And I want to actually go back to something from a previous slide real quick. So I want you to see here. This is the famous or infamous Sykes-Picot Agreement that everyone knows. I wanted to show this to show that the borders are arbitrary. There's no such thing as these countries that we talk about today, right? These are imperialist inventions. Their borders, even sometimes, most of the time, their names, their nationalities, these are not real things. They're not natural boundaries of people who are different than the people next to them. These are all fake. So, and the reason I point that out is because a lot of the times we speak anachronistically. We speak today and we impose it on before. So we'll say something like, oh, France got Syria and Lebanon, and England got Palestine and Jordan and Iraq. No, because there was no Palestine, Jordan, and Iraq. There was no Syria, Lebanon. They got territory with cities, and then they divided this territory arbitrarily, and they named it whatever they wanted to name it. But there is no defined boundary that separates Palestine from Lebanon, from Syria, from Jordan, from Iraq. Who's deciding these lines, and from when did they come from? So this idea doesn't exist. Before the British and French occupation, there was the Ottoman occupation and Ottoman provinces, right? Now, so let's go back to the map. What are we and what are we not? So let's say, this is very important because especially in my parents' generation, the Middle Eastern countries today, they tried their best to nationalize the people, to institute a strong sense of state nationalism, that the Syrian would truly think that he is different than the Iraqi, and he is different than the Jordanian, and the Iraqi will think the same, and the Jordanian will think the same. But this is, again, a very new imperialist thing that the Arab states bought into against their own interests, right? So like if you're from let's say there's a region in southern Syria, or let's say Iraq, because most of you guys are Iraqi here. So in northwest Iraq and south and northeast Syria, so here in this region here, like Deir ez-Zor, Al-Bukamal, Ramadi, these areas, even Raqqa, if we want to keep going north, and Mosul, right? Mosul and Hasaka. These areas, historically, there was nothing separating them. They never thought that they were a different people. The tribes overlap over the border. So what makes this one a Syrian and this one an Iraqi? Just because the French and the British drew a line? So please keep that in mind when talking about the Middle East. And this is we can say inter-ethnic if you want, but the same is true when it's not Arab states or Arabic speaking states. So like, for example, the Turkish Syrian border and the Turkish Iraqi border and the Iranian Iraqi border. So this is like, this is existing in all of these borders where you have people, let's say on the Turkish or Iranian sides of the border, who identify ethnically closer and linguistically closer to people in Syria or people in Iraq than they do with Ankara or Tehran, right? And this is very important to keep in mind when we're talking about census and MENA, that it doesn't encompass countries. It encompasses people and the way people think on an individual basis and how people identify themselves. So you can be Turkish, identify as something, and I can be Turkish in citizenship. Now, I'm not talking about ethnicity. In citizenship, let's say I'm Turkish and you're Turkish, but we are two different ethnicities, both living in Turkey and from what is today Turkey in the borders. And you identify as one ethnicity and put one bubble, and I identify as another ethnicity and put another bubble. So we have another question. Go ahead, Professor. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, sorry, it took me a while to unmute.
No problem.
It's nice to see you, Professor
you.
Daniel.
It's nice to meet you.
I was gonna just give an example of what you're saying because it's totally true. And if you take an example of the Kurds, we have Kurds in Syria, we have Kurds in Iraq, we have Kurds in Turkey. So this is a great example that they're all Kurds, but they live in different countries. So it's not necessarily the state or the country you live in. It's whatever your identity is.
Exactly.
You're still a Kurd even if you live in Syria and you have the Syrian nationality or Iraqi nationality.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I mean. Thank you. I'll go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just following up. Kurd, the reason why I read about it too. So the reason why they called Kurd because it's Kurdistan, it's a land. So Stan it means land. So the land of Kurd, it's all it's northern Iran, I think south of Turkey, Iraq, and Syria. So when you see all the the Kurdish or the Kurds, what lives in Iraq, they live in Turkey, they live in Syria and Iran. That means it because they are in their land. That's what they said, or that's what it's supposed to. I don't know, but so that's why they all in different countries. But the land itself, it's all in the 4 countries.
Right. So again, so this is the idea that I want I want us to go into it in, is that these are not, like, in another way of saying it, God did not institute these countries. These countries did not exist from Adam and Eve, right? These are from very recent, like less than 100 years ago. The British and the French made these countries. So in the minds of Kurds from 100 years ago, they are not in 4 different countries, right? So, but let's talk about the Kurds for a little bit and the Turks, because over history, migration happens. It's a natural thing, right? Just like how Arabs, like you mentioned earlier, they came up north from the peninsula. The Kurds came from east of the Zagros Mountains, which is here. And so they were in the Iranian plateau, or the greater Iran regions of Iran, Afghanistan, Northwest Pakistan, Tajikistan. Kurds were from these people. And then they came west of the Zagros Mountains to these areas that they're in now. The Turks also, they came from Turkestan, which is like where the Uyghurs are in West China, and also Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, these areas by west of Mongolia. So that's where the Turks are from. So then they also came west to where is today Turkey, used to be called Anatolia or Asia Minor. Parts of it. There are parts of it here. These were historically always parts of like the Levant and Mesopotamia that are south of the Taurus Mountains. The Taurus Mountains are the mountain range that separated the Greeks that used to live here from the Semitic speakers that lived south of them. Also Azerbaijan too. They are an ethnically Turkic people, right? They speak a Turkic language. So we're going to talk about whether or not linguistics has anything to do with ethnicity. In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. All right. So Arabized versus Arab. Does language dictate ethnicity? Now, as you can see here, the same is true, what I was saying about the borders, the same is true for the North African parts. You see all these straight lines? This is not natural. These are rulers, all right? So is an Arabized person an Arab? That really depends on him or her. If he or her, him or her identify as an Arab, they identify as one. But a lot of the time, the majority of Arabic speaking people are Arabized people, and they're not originally Arabian, right? So if you are, let's say, a Copt from Egypt, if you're a Coptic person from Egypt, you probably only speak Arabic, but you don't identify as an Arab. You know that you are a native Egyptian, and that over time in the Arab empires, you've become Arabized in your language, but your ethnicity is not Arab. And the same is true, let's say, for people who identify as that in Sudan or Libya, etc. Right? And this is also true in the regions we were talking about here. We were talking about, someone mentioned Kurdistan, but before the Kurds came to those areas, who was there? The people who speak Aramaic were there, right? The Assyrian, Syriac, Chaldean people. They were in those same villages and same mountains, and they're still there until today. Okay. So this is very important to remember, because what is something that exists today, the Arab League, again, it's a social construct, which means it's something that was invented recently by humans, and they try to include any country that have Arabic as an official language, even if they're not Arabs, or even if they don't even speak Arabic, like Somalia or Djibouti, or what are they called? Those islands, Comoros Islands. So yeah. So then, are these Arabs? No, probably not. Let's be safe. But you can't tell someone they're not something or they are something. They say what they are. And then for them to be in the Arab League, notice Syria, it's not green because it was recently suspended. But even the names of these, the Arab Republic of Syria, that's the official name, or the Arab Republic of Egypt. But are all Syrians Arabs? No, we just said that they're not. Same thing with Egyptians. So this is important to remember. Again, I'm going to keep tying it back into that MENA bubble, because this is the point of this. So we have to be careful when we're kind of grouping all of this together just in one lump sum chunk of people. But there is a reason. There is a positive reason that I'm going to get to for why there should be a bubble. But hopefully with time, the bubble becomes more suited to to anyone who takes, I guess, their identity seriously. I'm going to give an example that Professor Jane and Os were talking about regarding minorities, and I'm going to talk about Christians in the Middle East because that is the second largest religious group there. So, does religion play a role in ethnic identity? I should say a role. What role does religion play in ethnic identity? So it doesn't play a role in that it is a religion itself, because any ethnicity can convert to any religion. So it doesn't matter. However, it plays a role in a preservation of ethnicities from Arabization. So like in some cases, it prevents Arabization in the memory of the religion for the people to know that they had historically identified as this ethnicity or come from this heritage before the Arabs came. Because as we know, Christianity is older than Islam in the Middle East, having been there for 2,000 years. So most Christians in the Arab world, majority of them, do not identify as ethnic Arabs, even if they speak exclusively Arabic. Most of them do. Some of them speak other languages. Okay. So the native people of the Fertile Crescent, which means in Arabic we say Bilad al-Sham or Bilad al-Rafidain, so the Levant or Mesopotamia. The native peoples that have been Arab, that's who we're talking about. Those people who live there after Arabization. The same thing happened in North Africa, Egypt, but we might mention Egypt, but just for the sake of for this to be not as detailed, we're gonna just maybe focus on the Fertile Crescent. There are a small number of ethnic Arab Christians. So Christians who identify as Arabs they're a minority. Usually they trace their lineage back to pre-Islamic Christian Arab tribes like the Ghassasina, Bani Ghassan, and others. So, and I give 4 examples of ethnic identities of Middle Eastern Christians. So the Copts, they are the biggest, and in Egypt, they are the biggest in the Middle East, and they're from Egypt. And they do not claim to be ethnically related to Semitic speakers. So whether they are Arabs or Hebrews or Aramaic Syriac people, right? Armenians too. Armenians also do not claim that. So Armenia is a country, but a lot of Armenians live in the Middle East. But they are from their country originally, the Caucasus, and also they don't claim to be related to the Semitic speakers as well. And the third point we have here, so they call themselves in Aramaic, they call themselves Suraye or Suryoye. And the reason why I don't translate it, I just have the parenthesis with 4 options, is because they can't agree on what they should call themselves. So there's like a 4-way, it's like a 3 or 4-way fight between each other, but they are one group. They're called Surai or Suryoye. And also the Mandaeans are an Aramaic group, but they're not Christian nor Muslim. So these people are linguistically related, and maybe they would say ethnically related, to Arabs and Hebrews also, because of the language. And we're going to talk about African Semitic people in a second, or Semitic speaking people. Not speakers of Arabic, but of other language. And like I said earlier, there are a minority of Middle Eastern Christians who do identify as Arabs. They tend to be from the Byzantine rite of Christianity. So whether Greek Orthodox or Greek Catholic, Christians from, say, the Syriac branches or Armenian or Coptic, they don't usually identify to be Arabs. I think there's a question. If there's a question, please ask.
Daniel, there's a question in the chat.
Sure. Oh, there is. Okay. Let me see. Is it wrong to claim yourself as more than one thing? No, it's not wrong at all. You can claim, I claim myself to be more than one thing. So my dad, just giving you my background, my dad is Jordanian, Arab, and my mom is, I guess, Syriac, Aramaic, Chaldean, Assyrian, whatever you want to call these people, Suretha, we say. So, um, so he's, and even though both are Christian, they are two different ethnicities. So I claim both in my personal identification. Um, but no, it's not wrong to be more than one. Of course not. Um, okay, any other questions before I keep moving? No. All right. Okay. So we talked about
I do have something to add on to that.
Sure.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I feel like part of it has to do with like also where you grew up, where you lived, because like I know with my parents growing up in like a central Arab city, I feel like that has given us the ability to identify as that versus like although they're Chaldean and Syriac, I feel like living in the main city has given them the opportunity to identify as that. In addition, like coming to America has given us some different identities. So it's all kind of things that we kind of add up through the years based on where we've been and our experiences.
Thank you for that, Sarah. So I actually want to touch on that a little bit. I think, and tell me again, this is not, there's no like right or wrong answers here. It's just opinions. So I think if there isn't maybe a stable way of identifying, then identifications will keep changing, and there will keep like new ones will keep developing as the more you mix things together. So like the reason why I made the point about does language dictate ethnicity? I speak English. Can I now incorporate the English ethnicity of being an Anglo person into myself? I don't think so. If I learn German or French, also, it doesn't make me an ethnically Germanic person. Or if I'm Syriac from Turkey, which there are a lot of those, if I'm Syriac from Turkey, am I a Turkic person? No, I'm not Turkic. I just have Turkish citizenship, but I'm a Syriac ethnically. So in the same way, if my mom is from Basra, for example. If you know where Basra is, guys, it's right here by Kuwait. So my Arabic, even my dad is native Jordanian. So I speak a very like Bedouin, I guess, or thick accent, whether Iraqi or Jordanian, because they are from those populations or communities. Even my Iraqi Arabic is, I would say, maybe it's closer to maybe Khaliji than it is to Maslawi, and their Basra and Mosul are both in Iraq. So now it doesn't though make if my mom is in Basra and speaking that Arabic, it doesn't make her an Arab. She would herself say, even though she lived in the time of Arab nationalism, very strongly so, that she is not an Arab. But my dad would, because of heritage, I think. And these are again, this is an individual basis. Like Sarah would say that she would identify, whereas my mom would say she wouldn't, because she's not an Arab. But my dad does identify as an Arab. So like it really is subjective. There's no really objective measurement for this. My personal opinion, that I'm not imposing it on you, is that I think heritage should have something to do with it. Because being an Arab in a historical sense means that there's an Arab tribe with clans and a sheikh at one point and things like that. So like, for example, I mentioned the Ghassasina earlier, the Bani Ghassan. They came from Yemen, from Ma'rib, and then they came up to what is today Jordan, southern Syria. And there are many clans today in the same areas who all trace back to the Ghassasina. So to be an Arab, there needs to be, in my opinion, again, my opinion, not objective, subjective. In my opinion, there needs to be kind of an Arab structure of a history where it's like flan bin flan bin flan bin flan, which I can do 17 up, right? Um, there's a history there. I don't know if living in a place, or even if your parents lived in the place, I don't know if I could tie that ethnicity to myself. Like if my parents lived in I don't know, Japan, it doesn't. I don't think that I could then say I have Japanese ethnicity, especially if they didn't marry any Japanese people. That's just me. That's just my opinion. I think there was another question. No?
How about in the sense of American? Like, when would you choose to identify yourself as American?
I personally, I would not identify as American unless it's like a nationality and like official papers, because I have to, that's my nationality. But as if like culturally, I would not. Thank you for the questions. They're great questions, guys. Please keep them coming. Let's go for it.
Yeah, like if you consider, I think when you consider yourself like American, only if you're born in America, like you born in that land or whatever land, it's not necessary to be America. So any other land, if you're born there and you have your identity, can you consider yourself as from that nation, not ethnicity, just the nation?
Yeah. Right. So again, so let's go back to the first slide. So we said what is a nationality? So yes, you're right, Osa and Sarah. My nationality would be American because I was born in whatever country you're born in. If you have citizenship there and a passport, obviously the passport comes with it. If you don't have to apply, I'm saying, but that would be your nationality, because a nationality, again, like most of these things or all of them, is the social construct of what country you have rights under and protects you, and there is that kind of agreement between you and that state, like that you recognize to have the legitimate entity that is allowed to use violence. Again, back to the state thing, right? So the nationality is what state that you live in and have citizenship in. So that does not mean you identify ethnically with it. That just means that you have that nationality, not that ethnicity. So like if I'm Iraqi, if I have an Iraqi nationality, we all know that there's no such thing as an ethnic Iraqi. They don't even claim to have that. So if I have Iraqi nationality, that doesn't say whether or not I am a Kurd, I'm an Assyrian, Chaldean, Syriac person, I'm an Arab. It doesn't say. It just says that I have Iraqi nationality. Right? So in the same way in America, if I have American nationality and my African American friend has American nationality, but he identifies as African American, I identify, let's say, as Arab American or Assyrian, Chaldean, Syriac American. Rana, go for it.
I was going to actually use a personal example. So I was born in Bahrain, but I cannot claim citizenship of Bahrain because of guidelines. But my parents have Iraqi, like they're ethnically identified as Iraqi, where I claim my Iraqi identity. However, I have American citizenship. But the reason I'm bringing this up is sometimes you're unable to claim your, I guess you could say, citizenship of your place of birth due to like legal guidelines of the country, where they might have guidelines implemented where you must have a past generation that was born there in order to claim citizenship. So I know sometimes there is I guess you could say like some fine line or boundaries that do not permit you to, where you would end up eventually claiming your next location, or maybe just not have a claimed citizenship based on life's course.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And then these laws, as you know, they change over time. So like there are people, let's say Middle Eastern people in diaspora who went to Australia who were able to get citizenship because they got there before a certain date, or their kids are able to get citizenship because they got there before a certain date. Now it's harder. Like things like this that doesn't touch on ethnicity or the bubble, which is the topic here. It doesn't touch on which bubble we circle or we fill in. It just, this is just like a thing regarding international rights with us, and where we can have legitimacy in kind of a state to have as a home. Sometimes we chose that, sometimes we didn't choose it, but this is not touching on ethnicity necessarily. And we're gonna get to what is the purpose of MENA, because it's not. I'm not trying to dissuade MENA, and I'll get to that in a second. But Oz has a question. Go for it.
So I'm not just following up on Rana. I think the reason why you can't consider yourself like from Bahrain, it's because Bahrain was a temporary station, and you're born there, so you can't consider yourself as Bahraini because you don't live there, and you just happened that you born there, and your parents are from Iraq, so you take in your parents' ethnicity. So you go back to your parents because you don't have land, like a stable land for in that time. And now you're in America, you still considering, like, not considering, you still following your parents in ethnicity, but maybe your children, if they born here, they can take both ethnicity as like Americans and Iraqi, but maybe in a few other generation, like maybe 2 or 3 or 4 generation, then I don't know, I think people, they're gonna stop saying that you're from their region, and from Iraq, let's say. Like let's say my kids, as example, like my daughter, maybe like I don't know, like 3 or 4 generation after her, uh, my grandsons, they gonna consider themselves as Americans because they live in America, and we didn't move. We're not gonna move from America because this is the last station for us. I don't know if you can. Yeah, that's.
It could be. So look, let's use an example. So there are in Kuwait and Bahrain right now, there are, and as I think most of you know, citizenship in the Gulf is difficult to obtain. But in Kuwait and Bahrain, there are Christian citizens in Kuwait and Bahrain, citizens, and they have been there for since the 19th century, about. Um, and these Christians are actually not, and the Kuwaitis and Bahrainis know that these citizens are not Arabs, meaning they're not from Arab tribes. They came to Kuwait and Bahrain back when Kuwait and Bahrain were districts of Basra. Okay, so, and they came to work, and they came from where? They came from northern Mesopotamia. So what is today southern Turkey or northern Iraq? They are Syriac Aramaic people who moved to Kuwait and Bahrain and have citizenship now. So the ethnic, but these people only speak Arabic today. They are very, in terms of generations, like you were saying, they're very distant from, like, generationally from their origins. However, they know there is some sort of ethnic difference between them and the Arabs of Kuwait and Bahrain. But even in this case, Syriac speakers and Arabic speakers tend to have a close kinship to each other, because their languages are so close, right? And then that develops the idea of a related ethnicity, like an umbrella, if you will. And that's what I wanted to talk about regarding these East African groups. So the MENA bubble, it says Middle East and North Africa, but in a way, East Africa is closer, not just in geography, it's closer in geography, but even linguistically, it's closer. So you have Semitic speaking people in like Ethiopia, Eritrea, parts of Sudan that border those countries. Um, so these people speak Amharic or Tigrinya, and these are actually closer languages to Arabic, to Hebrew, to Syriac than say Turkish or Persian, which is not related whatsoever. But so it would be very odd for the Turk or the Persian, ethnic, of course, the ethnic Turk or the ethnic Persian, or even an Armenian from Iraq or from Syria or somewhere, to check the MENA bubble, but an Ethiopian or an Eritrean to not check it. So it doesn't, these are why, let me rephrase, for an Amhara or a Tigrinya to not check it. That's what I should say, because this is what the problem is by kind of grouping countries together instead of communities of people, because countries are multi-ethnic. They encompass many communities of people that are very different, and but so MENA, again, like I think we can conclude, I'm not trying to conclude the presentation, but just for the question of, is it accurate? I think we can agree that it's not. But MENA's important because it's not about, unfortunately, we're not at the point yet where it's about accuracy. We're at the point right now where MENA is simply just saying what we are not what we are. So we are not white. And the reason why that's important, I like, it's funny because in like a Middle Eastern context of speech, even, and of thinking, it's almost an insult to say we're not white, because we have phrases like Allah bayyid wajhak, which is a compliment, or an insult is Allah yasawwid wajhak, right? Like God white in your face or God black in your face. Like it's an off way to think, but these are common phrases in Arabic. But we're not white because as a minority community, like many other minority communities, our community faces disadvantages a lot of the time for being a minority community. And because of that, it should be allowed, or I would say entitled, because of what happened in our countries. And it's not like we came here because we felt like it, you know, to take advantage of the benefits that are available for disadvantaged minority communities. So having a MENA bubble just says what we are not. It just gives us an option to check instead of white. But MENA is not accurate in that it doesn't say what we are. It's not even close. And it's actually eventually, and I was telling Rana about this, my opinion, eventually we'll get to a point where MENA will become an offensive thing because it's so stereotypical and grouping all these random people together that have nothing to do with each other. So it's just a temporary thing so that we can have something else to put instead of white. But I think there's another question or another comment somewhere. I heard the ring. No? Okay. If not, we are done. We have about 7 minutes. They want me to go an hour. So we have about 7 minutes if anyone has any questions or any comments. Yeah, go ahead, Professor.
Hi, Daniel. I didn't want to interrupt you. I just want to make sure that everybody knows what MENA is. That's Middle Eastern North Africa. If you want to just explain that for a second. I just didn't want anyone to leave without knowing what MENA is.
Thank you, Professor. Yeah, I thought I did in the beginning. I'll go over it again. So the Middle East and North Africa, that's what MENA stands for, MENA, Middle East, North Africa. Again, the question is, what is the Middle East? Where does it start? Where does it stop? What is North Africa? Where does it start? Where does it stop? Who decides these things? Is it the Arab League? No, it's not the Arab League. So, and then even that, why is the Arab League what it is? So, it's a very undefined term, but it just stands for the Middle East and North Africa. Personally, when I check whatever bubble I eventually check, inshallah, in my lifetime, I want to check one with people that I identify with. But again, I would prefer to check it over white, even if it's not accurate. Anything else?
Daniel, I just want to add something on. I'm just looking at a previous message I sent you, so just bear with me.
Yeah, go for it.
So I just wanted to go over like the importance of like census, like the reason why it's very beneficial. I don't know if you want to elaborate, but I wrote a note in regards to the importance of like being visible within census is because it provides funding that helps the following, which is health research, language assistance, civil rights laws, reporting educational outcomes, crime reporting, small businesses to get loans, drawing congressional and state legislative boundaries. So the importance of having that bubble that Daniel's elaborating about is because currently within census, which is promoted every 10 years, we currently don't exist in a sense properly for what we see as within census, where the option under census that we're available to select is the white category. And like within the category, like it elaborates that. One second, I'm just going to another text just to give you the details. I apologize.
No, take your time.
Where is it? So like currently on census, it says the Census Bureau defines white people as follows. White refers to a person having origins in any of the original peoples of Europe, the Middle East, or North Africa. It includes people who indicated their races as white as reported entries such as German, Italian, Lebanese, Arab, Moroccan, or Caucasian. But it emphasizes the available visible option for, I guess you could say, the Middle Eastern ethnic identity to select from is white or Caucasian. So just providing, I guess you could say, a secondary option where we feel that is deemed more appropriate is very important, just so that we can benefit from the census and the allocated fundings for Census 2030. Because as of now, from 2021 until 2030, we're going to eventually have to make another recommendation, whether it's a Middle Eastern category, a MENA category, MENA, like whatever the acronym is. And hopefully it's a good beginning stages like Daniel is referring to, and hopefully it will evolve into something we could all identify as, but it's important so that we exist.
Absolutely. Well said, Rana.
Thank you.
Anything else, you guys?
I think to add on to that, I know that when we think of the census, we think 10 years from now, like that's so long, nothing is going to change. But I know with the Census Bureau, just information, they do yearly, like smaller surveys, and they do them yearly. So to get started in progressing for something that's 10 years ago or that's so far away, I think it's good to start working minimally, like with our yearly surveys, start getting like, especially areas in San Diego that, you know, get them started, companies, get schools started. So it's really about starting small, and then the end goal would be to change it in 10 years. But I think ideally what's important is to start focusing on local and smaller surveys, smaller things that the Census Bureau might do that could eventually progress to the 2030 census as well.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. These things are long term. Os?
So what he's saying, it's the white people are from Europe. Is that what he's saying?
So the thing she read, the thing Rana read is current white people. When we put in white, what happens is it counts everyone who has their origins in Europe, the Middle East, North Africa, and the Caucasus.
Yeah, but
So-
yeah, exactly. So, but that's only in America. But what I think it's the white people is the Caucasians. The Caucasians are white people who moved. I think they immigrant from the Caucasia.
Yeah, from the Caucasus. That's right. From the Caucasus and then Europe.
And,
So
and what about the Ari? Like the Aris?
that's a good point. Yes, I thank you for bringing that up. So the Aryans, Iran, right? That's what Iran means. Iran.
Oh, so it's mean Iran. That's what.
Yeah. So that's exactly what it means. Iran is the land of the Aryans. Kurds are those people. Northern Pakistanis, Northwest Pakistanis, Afghans, Tajikistanis, Afghans, Tajiks. These are all, I guess you could say, in a way, the original white people. This is why Mina is like, it even separates white people from each other. So you're right. You're absolutely right. The problem, though, and here's what Rena was trying to say. The problem is when we are marking white in America, we are losing things that we shouldn't lose. So, like, if you guys don't know, for the people who have recognized minorities, when they check their own bubble, African American, Hispanic, whatever it is, they then they are classified in a way to receive benefits in a certain situation, like college application or whatever it is, because they're from a disadvantaged community to begin with, whereas we don't. The Middle Eastern community in America does not receive those because we're checking white. But we don't have another option. We have to be checking white right now because they count us as white. However, when we have our own bubble, which we should, then we will get those benefits too, because we are from a disadvantaged community. I hope that makes sense.
Daniel, I feel like it's a 2-in-1. One, it's claiming your visibility in America. And then the second one is with claiming your visibility because we have an appropriate bubble, is gaining the benefits through our racial category.
So you're 100% right, Rana. I think for the first part of it, of kind of identifying as what you are for on principle, I think that means more. This is just my opinion. I think that means more to us as like those who have a heritage of it. But for those who are coming from back home, like first generation, I think that sometimes, not always, sometimes they want to distance themselves from a lot of that stuff. and would like to be American or white or whatever. So the economic reason or the other benefits, that would be kind of the main motivation for some of that group, that community. But for people maybe who are born here or came at a young age, who still want who want to have ties kind of with back home, or have some sort of I don't know, I don't want to say like nostalgia, because maybe we don't remember anything, but some sort of like emotional or romantic or romanticist connection with back home. Like, I've never even been there, but I for some reason I have this kind of passion for it. So I think that part of it is not as strong for the people who come and have seen so much negativity, wars and persecution, etc. So uh, it's not a selling point for everybody, you know. Anything else, you guys?
If anyone has any more closing comments or questions, you could either put it in the chat box, use your raise hand feature, or unmute your mic.
Okay.